Cool. So I'm going to start with a bit of an intro about who Hyperact are and who I am, and then we'll jump straight into the meat and bones of it. So Hyperact are an award-winning digital development consultancy. We partner with startups and scale-ups, and we were founded in almost 2 years ago now in Manchester and Leeds. And we provide hands-on advisory support in the full development life cycle. So that's design, engineering, and product. So we service the full life cycle. So we provide lots of different services from product strategy, product discovery, so helping a business de-risk and find their way through the problem spaces, and then obviously product delivery, so taking things that have come out of discovery and driving those forward to live. We've got various different models of how we work through with clients. So we have dedicated teams. So some clients like us to spin up a team to deal with something in silo. We prefer to be team augmented, right? So we like to be embedded in kind of the daily ceremonies of the client. And then you've got kind of more consolidated consultancy pieces that go alongside that. So a bit about me. I've had an interesting route through my career, as most of us have, through digital that have been knocking about for a while. So I started in 3D animation. I was making training in the education sector, and then moved over to web in 2009. Moved into national brand side, worked for some big national brands, and found consultancy in 2019, and I've been in various consultancies since then. So as a design lead in a consultancy, it's useful to be T-shaped. So some of you may not have heard that term, but it means being able to adapt and pivot across various different spaces, especially in a smaller and growing consultancy, which is where I am now. So I work across product, service, and design strategy. So as part of my journey through digital and consultancies, I've helped build and maintain teams across in design and research practices, both internally and on client, and that's kind of contributed towards the stories that I'm going to be telling today. And as well as part of that, I've kind of worked on client to collaborate, to build teams, build broken relationships between teams as well. So lots of gnarly challenges in the past. So I've expanded a little bit on the story that we're going to tell. As I was writing the talk, it became clear that there was a fuller story to tell here. So we're going to look at fostering a design using the skills that come along with being a designer and a researcher, and things that actually we may take for granted, and how we can use those to improve collaboration, alignment, and influence change, so that whether that's internally within our team or cross team as well, upwards, sideways, and downwards. So there are common themes that I see from a skill set in design and research. And again, as I mentioned, we take some of these things for granted, but I think it's a lot of them are truly like superpowers in the digital world. So storytelling, a lot of us have to take teams, clients, leaders, different shapes from all around the business through a narrative, and our storytelling skills are important for that, and we can apply that in different ways in different parts of our roles. Continual feedback. So most, if not all of us, especially in the design world, will be reaching out for continual feedback, whether that's internally or across the business, and that can be applied elsewhere as well. Nurturing inclusion. So we're naturally outward facing, and we want to continually try and pull people together, make sure that we're getting feedback from all over the business, make sure that we're hearing all the voices and from all the right places. Lots of us will have either been in or facilitated workshops, and that toolkit that we developed through our careers can certainly be applied elsewhere to maybe think slightly outside of the box, which is some of the things that I'll be going through today. Egoless where possible. So this is a tough one, isn't it? We're in a pseudo subjective world, right, as designers. So it's important that we try and, going back to nurturing inclusion, be collaborative. We need to. We're normally the final sign off, but it's useful for us to kind of have that kind of that role within teams. Obviously, we're human first champions, and that comes with lots of benefits that we can apply as well. And strategic thinking, right? So how can I think outside of what I'm doing and applying in the now, and maybe think about how that can have a positive impact going forward. So I've taken those themes and I've applied them to 6 tips that we're going to go through, with a little bonus story at the end that had to crowbar in. And I've applied a practical real life scenario to them all that I've either seen or been involved in or driven as a design lead. So tip number 1, empathizing with internal stakeholders. So lots of us, as part of our design process, will regularly empathize with our users, and I found it useful to use these skills to look inwardly as well into the business, and try and understand complexities of people and teams that we're working with that we might not on the surface first understand. So as we know, humans are inevitably far more complex than technology, and kind of continually analyzing that and making sure that we're making the right decisions for the right reasons. We all, I'm sure, work with complex characters, people who are difficult to influence, people who come across as abrasive or standoffish, or they don't want to take, as a designer for an instance, what we output as value. And on the surface that may seem dismissive, but there's always lots of things going on under the hood, and putting empathy and mapping into practice has been useful to kind of understand different viewpoints. So this is, in practice, I was on a client who was struggling to communicate a really complex, really expensive program to the people who were holding the purse strings effectively. Everyone in the team was getting frustrated, and I came into the client to help with a broader kind of communication strategy. But actually, as part of that, I quickly identified that it would be useful to try and get inside the head of the people that we're communicating with, to understand if we could get a new frame to then maybe come at the challenge in a different way. So I pulled a team into an empathy mapping session. Some of them had never done it before. In fact, I don't think any of them had. I think there was some hesitancy, but we ran the sessions a couple of times with a few small groups, and we were dealing with very actually a couple of specifically complex director level, as I mentioned, and we came out with themes. You can see some affinity mapping on the right. Actually, I've pulled out the actual affinity map that I did on that exercise, and people in the team came out from that understanding more about why that complex character might be responding in an abrasive way. And it kind of refreshed the attitude on the team, and gave us a different kind of, it gave us a good starting point to renew and re-energize how we were approaching the problem. You can see a quote down there. We had a very angry engineer who thought it was going to be a waste of time. It kind of came out of it understanding more about how the complex characters might be feeling and how we could approach it differently. So my challenge to people on the call, I'm going to assume most of us work with, have a complex character knocking around in the business that we're trying to communicate with, we're trying to get value from, we're trying to build alliances with. My advice, if you want to kind of try it internally, build a safe space. So, there's going to be conversations that happen within there that are sensitive. Make sure that it's a private space where people who attend can be as open as possible, because that's where the value comes from. Obviously, setting clear context to the session, how it's going to go, how you're going to run it, what the value of it is, right? Starting with the why, and hopefully outputting some value that you can then ideate on and do a further workshop within the team to understand what you've learned from that internal empathy mapping, and how it might affect how you either communicate with that person or approach one of the challenges that you're hitting a brick wall with differently. Cool. Okay. Tip number 1. So tip number 2, leading the way with storytelling. So I mentioned this as one of the themes. As designers and researchers, we've got a lot of work to do all the time in communicating our value. We tell stories, we tell narratives about, I don't know, research study, or how a design has evolved, or how something has gone live and what we've learned from the data, and those things that come naturally to us. We can use that in different ways, and we can look wider and see if we can help the wider business. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but it's not coincidence. Every client I've been on, there's some cringy kind of storytelling processes, procedures, and outputs that come when lots of different team members come together. Poor storytelling erodes confidence, right? So even if the outputs and the outcomes are super valuable, if you're not putting that information across in a clear and concise way, and you're doing yourself and the business is doing itself a disservice. People are trying to tell stories all the time, right? So like I said, I don't know, like business updates, brown bags, all the kind of stuff that goes along with a business trying to communicate, show and tells, right? Show and tell. So keeping the audience on side and keeping people motivated across the business. And obviously, storytelling hooks into human emotion, right? So how can we as designers and researchers use those skills that we tend to have in more abundance to help a business tell a story? So a case study for this. This was actually, I think it was the same client as case study number 1. So as part of that empathy mapping, we were trying to understand the audience that we were telling the story to. They didn't understand why this huge program was taking so long, why it was costing so much, why the phase that they were paying so much for wasn't outputting any tangible results. And you had lots of different teams all dropping into a huge presentation with no quality control, all different styles, all different levels of detail, so vertically, horizontally, and it was super important for the people that didn't have time to, and obviously weren't in this day to day, to understand A, the progress, and B, the value of what they were getting. So we evaluated, actually it was the follow-up from the empathy mapping. So we evaluated how they were telling that story. We pulled the narrative completely apart, put it back together, and with that obviously applied some consistency, everything that makes a designer wince when we're watching a show and tell or a presentation. And I kind of gave them some, guidelines in order to go forward with telling a clear and concise story. So outcomes, the phase that they were in, that they were struggling to communicate, the second phase got signed off, and the consultancy that I was on through the into the client, we extended with a seven-figure revenue. So great for the client, right? Because we were in the teams and the client, the teams were bought into getting this program phase 2 signed off, and great for the consultancy, right? Because we're helping with business growth. So how can you support your business with storytelling? Leading with the why. I think it's called the golden circle, right? I think it's a marketing technique, but always setting context, helping your business set context, right? Because different types of people jump into information in different ways. Consistency, like when there's lots of different people as well contributing to a story or a narrative that we're telling, consistency is super key. And information design, as designers, not all of us are creative, some of us are more on the UX side, but we tend to come with an understanding of how to put across information and visualizations to help that storytelling. So yeah, challenge back to everyone. Can you see weaknesses in the business that you can help with? Cool. Okay. Tip number 3. It's a privilege to represent our product's users, right? So I just think there's a massive opportunity to make sure that we're opening our door to the business, and there's lots of different ways to do that, right? So we're going to talk through that a little bit here, but throw the keys out, right? Give them out for free and try and get people involved and collaborating. So yeah, as I've touched on before, as designers and researchers, we should be outward facing, whether that's with our customers, but we can also apply that internally. So we can drive that behavior internally. We're dealing with subject matter that is partly subjective, no matter how much data we have, but that's great. I think in most instances, because it can spark debate, it can spark conversation, it can bring people together. And it's not our duty, but it's our opportunity to be a people connector. So it's not necessarily in our job descriptions, but I think it's part of what one of our superpowers and what we should be applying and what we could be applying across different scenarios. So case study, I was on a client who was in super hyper growth. When I joined the client, I think there was probably 20, 25 people. So early doors, everyone was collaborating, everyone was communicating. And as that hyperinflation happened within the business, that was amazing, right? Because that's what we're all there for. People and teams started to become siloed. So we established a drop-in crit session anyway. So internally, our design team grew. I think we grew the design and research team up to sort of 40, 50 people. So we had huge drop-in design crits. They were weekly, but actually we sent those invites out to everyone across the business, including C-suite, including directors, including people horizontally all the way across the other side of the business. And we honed our communication, and we got some really interesting people dropping in to just listen in, right? As a minority practice, which most of us tend to be in, especially in larger establishments, we've got continual work to educate and to communicate about our value and our outputs and outcomes. So, I mean, a design crit is a great space to do that. And yeah, inviting those people who, it doesn't matter if they don't turn up every week, it's optional, right? But if you can get someone who's obviously very busy but finds a spare half an hour, drops in, listens in, we had some really great feedback, some great responses, and it just helps maintain that alliance across the business and that kind of early startup feel that we had in the earlier time. So yeah, a couple of methods that we've used in various places. So as I mentioned, open design crits, just try it, send it out if it has a bad response. If you get people coming in and giving negative feedback or feedback that's not constructive rather, then you can review that, but it's certainly worth a try. Lunch and learn drop-ins, so another great tool to communicate, tell a story, tell a narrative about something you've learned, something you're trying to learn, something that's on your roadmap that you're interested in, and again, try and get people from all across the business to drop in, give you half an hour, and yeah, see how it goes. Pecha Kucha is another format. Some of you will have heard of it, some maybe not. I think it's 20 slides in 20 seconds each, which is a bit intense. Had a bit of a meltdown during one of them, but we've used that format for telling internal stories about products that we've had, but equally it's a great way to build team alliances. And we've told personal stories, we've got to know each other. We've used it in evening events as well, right, to tell stories about things we're interested in. It's a really fun way to kind of get everyone collaborating and understand more about either an interesting bit of information or something about yourself. Cool. Tip number 4. Nurturing departmental champions. So this is about looking for the people across the business that show an interest in what we're doing. They clearly understand the value of what we're doing, and you can nurture that that relationship and use it to build bridges. So a lot of what we do now is quantifiable. What we're doing is come a long way. We're no longer, some people still see kind of design as a bit of a dirty word, right? I still get jokes about, about my crayons, and I just kind of smile through it. But that's just part of being a minority practice. We've got work to do to continually educate, and if we can find someone in our business that is in different areas of the business that we can connect with, and we can use that relationship to help educate further. So putting this into practice, this was a different client again. There was fractures between the design and the engineering team. It was very much throwing designs over the wall, no communicating via tickets or all the kind of stuff that some of us have seen before, but we shouldn't be seeing, but it does happen. Design wasn't able to engage during the build delivery, so it was like, we've got your designs, thank you very much. But there was a very passionate front-end engineer on the client, super vocal about that kind of that relationship breakdown, and I paired up with him and ideated how we could fix the issue. So we started a front-end guild. So we co-collaborated on that. So designers, front-end engineers, both working together to kind of facilitate that group discussion, and we put that into practice, and it slowly healed some of that relationship. We also looked at tooling. What tools could we implement to fix the relationships between teams? And as an example, when I was just leaving the client, they were just implementing Chromatic, which is a visual testing tool. So essentially, it gives designers the kind of equal sign off during the delivery phase, to make sure that not only is the code peer reviewed, but also the design's right. So great way of kind of helping build bridges between those two specific practices in that instance. So challenge back to people on the call or watching the video. So how can you create and nurture a champion? Can you find that person? Can you put in regular catch-ups with them? Can you give each other time to ideate how to close those gaps? How to champion all the great work that you're both doing? Inviting other departments to research sessions is another great tool I've seen. Great way to kind of get different teams close to the user, because we're all so busy. It's really easy for different types of practices to drift away from why we're actually building what we're building. And as I mentioned, kind of co-hosting, either an all hands or a lunch and learn, there's real power in that. Pairing up with that champion that might be in a different space, and both coming together on a similar message. Had great success with that in the past. Okay. Tip 5, scratch an influencer's back. So I think this is relatively similar to the previous tip, but I think it can really drive some real value. So an influencer is someone in the business who has gravitas, has great connections, might be involved in a part of the product or a part of the strategy that's would be really useful for you to be involved in or to find out more about. Scratch their back and they'll owe you their time. I think it's a great way of exchanging time as a currency, and I'll dig a bit more into the case study of how I've implemented that before. And it's just a great tool, right, for as I mentioned, learning more personal development, because you get time, you get one-to-one time with really interesting people, and also absorbing information about things that you may be able to bring back to your practice or your role, and use it to steer or pivot slightly. It was tough to find an image to match this, but consistency, as we know from one of our other tips. So the practice was actually reached out to by a managing director. And it's a practice that I was in the leadership team of, and they asked for some help, right? So presentation class role. So all product designers, roll their eyes. It's like, that's not my job. That's not what we're here for. He doesn't understand what we do. But I saw that as an opportunity, and I saw that as an exchange of time. So I put my hand up and took it on as a side of desk activity. I gave him 8 hours of my time, and I was doing work that, trying to be egoless, right? So doing stuff that wasn't necessarily in my work remit at that time, but I knew that I would I would get value back from that exchange of time. So outcomes, I mean, I got one-on-one time with a super senior guy. I was able to help, as part of that, help educate him on actually what we do day to day, which obviously he should know, but we can't blame some people for taking career routes that don't necessarily cross directly with what we're doing on the day to day. And I got fantastic one-to-one insights about business strategy that I could use as a leader of the design team to help us move forward as well. I nurtured a new design champion. So although kind of in that instance, I wasn't necessarily kind of in the meat and the bones of product design or product strategy, as part of the education piece, he understood far more about what we did and why we did it, and was able to back us in those really kind of complex conversations that we know happen. And when I left the business, he said verbatim, reach out to me anytime, right? So I've got an ally there, a really senior guy who understands more, not only understands more about what design does as a practice in a product environment, but also a great ally to have in the industry. So give it a go. Ask for clarity about wider business objectives. Volunteer for side of desk. So you've got to kind of make that call, right? On do I think that giving my precious time as a super busy designer or researcher is gonna pay dividends here? But I'm net positive with me putting my hand up through the years and helping out with things, and it's always kind of paid off and been super valuable. And don't be afraid to call in your favors. I think some complex characters or some different types of characters may not respond to that, but hopefully most of the people that we work with will appreciate you helping out, going out of your way, and they'll scratch your back in return. Okay. Tip 6, add a cheat sheet to your toolkit. So as we've mentioned, we're all super busy. We all work with super busy people, but our output is really important, and we can use different ways to communicate that. So different types of people digest and process information differently. So how can us as designers take the outputs and outcomes and value that we are generating and communicate that in various different ways in order to build on that education and build on that alliance. Leverage your business information distribution culture. So how does your business favor sharing information? Can you leverage that? Can you come up with different ways of interactively and engagingly sharing the value of what you do on the day-to-day? Stakeholder preference. So if you're trying to speak to a specific person or stakeholder, you're trying to influence someone or something across the business, how does that specific team or person like to receive information? And maybe test out different ways of communicating with them. And how mature is your business? I think these different methods work probably at different levels. So if you've got a super fast moving startup, you may communicate in a different way, and I guess pulling together a chunky artifact might not kind of fly, and you can use your Slack or your Teams to come up with creative ways of doing so. So I thought about this this case study, changed it a couple of times, but I'm going to tell you a story actually about Hyperact. So we're moving fast, we're growing, but we're all spinning a lot of plates. We've got a lot of exciting things going on, and we hadn't built a consistent way of communicating all the things that are keeping us getting out of bed in the morning in a consistent way. So I guess it's like a pseudo cheat sheet, right? But we've established our MVP process of communicating. We send out week notes, and that gives the people on the team who are spinning those different plates really targeted updates on how all the things are going. We had positive feedback from across the business, and we've reduced fragmented disruptive requests. So it's far more tailored and far more focused. Now, that's kind of an MVP approach. When I'm being really specific about a cheat sheet, on the right hand side you can see the imagery that I did before I changed the case study. So if you're in a larger business, and similar to some of the case studies that I mentioned before, you've got teams that are fragmented. How can you engage and communicate in the value and the progress that you're making in different ways? So this is kind of similar to something that you could test in an internal brand if you're working internally, or something you could help implement on a client if you're working on a consultancy or agency side. But packaging up really tailored progress and information, give out links, get people involved in all the things that we've spoke about today, right? So give them links out to your dashboards, give them links to your designs, show them videos of snippets of your research, and consistency is key, as we've talked about. So if you establish a template, try and see if it gains traction and gets good feedback. Well, I think I've jumped into some of this already. Yeah, you can workshop it, right? So those different methods of the way that your business is communicating, can you come up with a different way of bundling up all the cool stuff that you're doing as a designer and a researcher, and communicating that in a different way? You could empathize, like we talked about in tip number 1, and then pivot, so you can work out who you're speaking to and what their kind of misunderstandings or what their communication style might be. As I mentioned, once you've got a template, it's super easy to update. So test your templates and see how they land. And obviously, you don't want this to be too heavyweight, right? Like we're doing in Hyperact with our week notes. You want to be applying something that you can update really quickly and fire out. But get feedback where you can. Can you get any engagement data where possible? And can you get any insights to then progress forward and iterate on that? So I've crowbarred one more story in just because it's so hilarious. I had to get it out. I tried to fit it into one of the case studies. I think Lee, when we caught up a few days ago, it was in one of the case studies, but it didn't quite work. So I pulled out, and I've got to tell it. So I was on a client who were using a traffic light system to map the progress of their goals. So green being everything's going fine, amber being there's a chance of this goal not reaching where we thought it was going to be by the quarter or the month, and then obviously red. And we were using this traffic light system in our team, and it was working really well. So when we had red against our team, everyone would swarm on it. Everyone would unblock it. It would get raised up to different levels of the business to help make sure that we were constantly turning those reds back into oranges and greens to keep the goals moving. So this method was used and reviewed at all different levels of the business, and at the C-suite refused to have a red color against the name, obviously based on old school connotations of, underperformance or failure. So, so the facilitator just changed the color palette, which is absolutely amazing, to light blue, medium blue, and dark blue. That was absolutely fine. Everyone was absolutely fine with that. Crack on. So the directors were like, right, okay, I'm dark blue this week. Super accessible, obviously. And some of the times there was only two of the blue shades on screen. So you're like, is that a light blue? Is that a medium blue? I think it's a medium blue. But listen, right, it just shows human psychology is, the psychology of information design. It is so interesting, and we're dealing with some interesting people along our journeys. So yeah, that's the end of my chat. It'd be great to connect with anyone who's watching. It'd be great to hear if you implement any of the tips, or if you have any tips for me. Always looking to learn. So reach out, add me on LinkedIn if we're not already connected, and yeah, let's have a natter.